I invite you to listen to my new dramatic story about military honor, betrayal, and rightful retribution on the Purple Heart Stories channel. I'm sure it won't disappoint you. Please support with a like and subscription if you enjoy it. Chapter 1: Fragments of Truth. My name is Alex Rayner. I'm 43 years old, and for the last 11 years, I commanded a special unit you've never heard of. Now I own a lingerie atelier with my wife Monica, a 30-year-old beauty whom I married after rescuing her from Afghan captivity. I always knew her feelings for me were mixed with gratitude, but I was too selfish to refuse them. The Intimate Whisper Atelier was located in the historic center of the city, in a red brick building with ornate cast-iron railings and wide shop windows. The bell above the door jingled. I looked up from the ledger and nodded to a couple, regular customers. "Mr. and Mrs. Howard, nice to see you." I forced a smile that, I'm sure, looked genuine enough. 11 years in Special Forces taught me to control my facial expressions no worse than my pulse during a sniper shot. "Alex," Jennifer Howard broke into a smile. "Monica suggested a new corset model, said Thomas would go crazy." Her husband, owner of 3 car dealerships, cleared his throat awkwardly. "I always liked the Howards. They were that rare type of wealthy clients who didn't consider service staff second-class citizens." "She's in the fitting room," I nodded toward the salon. "Lillian will escort you." Our administrator, a petite blonde with a perfectly straight back, immediately appeared beside the clients. I returned to the bookkeeping. The numbers didn't add up, and that was irritating. Not that we were short of money, on the contrary, the atelier was flourishing. Too flourishing, to be honest. Our margin was higher than that of the other 5 luxury ateliers in the city combined. The official explanation lay in exclusive materials and individual tailoring, but I understood enough about economics to realize something wasn't right, especially with VIP clients who left sums that could cover a month's turnover. "You look great, Danny," Monica's slightly husky voice sounded. I looked up. At the entrance stood my brother, Daniel Rayner. Our parents must have both been thinking of someone named Daniel when nomming us. How else to explain why we were named almost identically? "Just stopped by to visit my favorite relatives." Daniel hugged Monica, keeping his hands on her waist a bit longer than propriety required, and headed toward me. "How's business, bro?" I rose to embrace my brother. He was a couple of inches shorter but moved with some captivating ease. Daniel had always been more charismatic than me. He had what our father called inner magnetism. Mom said he could charm even a snake. I, however, managed without these abilities. I had enough skill to kill snakes with my bare hands. 6 ways for vipers, 8 for cobras. "Your wife looks insanely good in that blouse." Daniel lowered his voice. "She looks insanely good in general. Your lucky little brother." I remember. I glanced at Monica, who was helping Alina, our best seamstress, hang samples from the new collection. My wife was indeed stunningly beautiful. At 30, she could pass for 25, shoulder-length blonde hair, always perfectly styled, eyes the color of spring sky before a storm, chiseled figure. Flawless makeup and manicure, even when working with fabrics. Monica always looked as if she were about to be photographed for the cover of a glossy magazine. "How's that zoning issue coming along?" I asked, remembering that my brother had mentioned some problems with permits for a new office center. Daniel winced. "Still the same jerk from city administration blocking the deal, but I'll resolve the issue, don't worry." He looked around. "By the way, where's your VIP zone? I'm thinking of bringing a couple of business partners next week. They need special gifts for their wives." "Third door on the right," I nodded, "but there's currently—" I didn't finish. Daniel was already heading toward the indicated door. "Monica," he called out, "won't you show me what new items you have for special clients?" My wife excused herself to Alina and followed my brother. They disappeared behind the VIP zone door. I returned to the bookkeeping, trying to dismiss the unpleasant feeling from the way Daniel had looked at my wife. My brother and I had always competed. The eternal theme, older brother versus younger. Daniel was smarter, craftier, more charming. I was stronger, more resolute, more focused. Our father, a former military man, always held me up as an example. This drove Daniel to fury. I remembered well how we both fell in love with Monica almost simultaneously. Daniel found himself in the role of runner-up for the first time, and he didn't like it. When Monica chose me, it was a real blow to him. For several months he kept his distance, then suddenly offered peace, declaring that blood is more important than hormones. I agreed. And now, 6 years later, I wondered if this had just been a temporary retreat on his part. Mr. Rayner, Lillian's voice pulled me from my thoughts. That jeweler from the neighboring shop is asking again if we're planning to install additional security. They've had their third robbery in a month. Tell him I'll contact the security company next week. But Lillian didn't leave, nervously fiddling with the bracelet on her wrist. He says he saw a suspicious person examining our doors yesterday evening. Maybe we should. Thank you, Lillian, I interrupted her. I'll take care of it. The girl nodded and returned to the counter. I made a note in my day planner. Indeed, it was worth thinking about additional protection, especially considering the nature of our clientele. 32 cameras for an atelier with an area of just 400 square meters. The dark-skinned technician in a uniform jumpsuit whistled. You're either paranoid or storing the crown jewels here. Let's just say I have experience in the security field. I sipped my coffee. I want no blind spots. And the fitting rooms, the technician tactfully inquired. Usually we don't install equipment there for privacy reasons. Not needed in the standard fitting rooms, I nodded. But in the VIP zone, let's say there are often very valuable items left unattended. Place cameras there discreetly. Don't worry, I got consent from the owner. Technically, I didn't lie. I owned the atelier together with Monica. The fact that she didn't know about the cameras in the VIP zone was a separate issue. Bastion Security Company had a reputation as the best in the city. They also serviced the jewelry store next door, which only confirmed their class. They worked quickly. The installation of the entire system took just one day. Demo access is already active. The technician handed me a tablet with the installed application. All cameras are visible in real time. The system will begin full recording at midnight tonight. The archive is stored for 60 days. I verified, scrolling through the camera images. Yes, as you requested. You can store longer, but additional payment for extended cloud storage would be required. The technician was collecting his tools, glancing at the clock. Mr. Rayner, we've completed all the work. If you have any questions, call any time. I signed the acceptance certificate and escorted the technician out. The atelier was already closed, but Alina had stayed late, finishing an urgent order. She nodded to me from the far corner of the hall, where she was working on a translucent bustier. Don't stay too late, Alina, I waved to her. Lock up after yourself. Of course, Mr. Rayner, I'm almost finished. I went outside, where Monica was waiting, elegant even at the end of the workday. Finished with the cameras, she took my arm. Daniel said it's a waste of money, nothing ever happens here. Tell that to the jewelers from the neighboring store, I shrugged. Besides, after the incident with that aggressive client. Monica winced, remembering the unpleasant scene from 2 weeks ago. A drunk man had burst into the atelier, demanding a refund for poor quality lingerie that had torn during first use. He had shouted, waved his arms, and nearly hit Lillian, who was trying to calm him down. I had to intervene. 1 second to assess the situation, 3 more for the takedown, restraint, and escort to the exit. No one was hurt except the troublemaker's pride. But I remembered the fear in Monica's eyes. You're still a paranoid, she lightly touched the scar on my cheek. But I like that about you, you worry about me. Of course I worry, I pulled her close. "You're the most precious thing I have." We had dinner at the Italian restaurant across the street, discussing plans for the weekend. Monica wanted to go to the country house, built with my combat pay. I agreed, although I preferred the city. It was easier to control the surroundings there. Paranoia? Perhaps, but it had saved my life more than once. We returned home around 10. Monica went straight to the shower and I opened the security company's application on the tablet. The cameras worked perfectly. I could see the empty sales floor, utility rooms, corridors, cash register area, and basement storage. There was a dim light in the VIP zone. Strange. I tapped on the image to enlarge it. The system automatically activated recording when motion was detected. Someone had been in the VIP zone after closing. Perhaps Elena had gone to check orders, or Lillian had forgotten something. I reviewed the recording and froze. Monica and my brother. They had entered the VIP zone at 7:15 p.m., 15 minutes after the official closing. Daniel pressed my wife against the wall, kissing her neck. She tilted her head back, half closing her eyes. There was no sound in the system, but I could read lips perfectly, another useful military habit. "Did you service Judge Harris today?" Daniel was asking. "Yes, as you requested. Recorded everything," Monica replied. "Good girl, he's already signed the necessary papers. Now it's my turn for special service." I watched as my brother had his way with my wife on the velvet sofa in the VIP zone of our family atelier, and a cold emptiness grew inside me. Watching infidelity is an unpleasant thing. I had seen such scenes through a sniper rifle scope, militants' wives cheating on them with other men during their terrorist husband's absence. We never reported this to our superiors. We just quietly observed the interesting scenes that helped pass the long hours of surveillance. But one thing was strangers' wives in faraway Afghanistan. Quite another was your own, in your business with your brother. Even more disturbing was the strange conversation about Judge Harris. I knew he was one of the big clients, ordering expensive lingerie for his wife. He came in person, often staying for closed consultations with Monica. What did "recorded everything" mean? And what necessary papers had the judge signed? The sound of the shower turning on in the bathroom brought me back to reality. I turned off the tablet and hid it in the safe. Despite the shock, I was thinking clearly. Lieutenant Colonel Alex Rayner, commander of the Ghosts Special Unit, couldn't allow himself an emotional reaction. The situation required additional information. A week had passed since the cameras were installed, a week that changed my perception of reality. I didn't make scenes, neither with Monica nor with my brother. I behaved as usual. Smiled at clients, kissed my wife in the mornings, discussed city news with my brother. And at night, I reviewed the camera footage. During this week, Monica conducted special consultations with 5 VIP clients. All men, all influential figures in the city. Judge Harris was just one of them. The others were Police Chief Stevens, owner of the largest construction company McKinsey, the city newspaper's editor-in-chief Patterson, and Mayor Warren. With each of them, Monica discussed something that went far beyond choosing lingerie. Watching these recordings, I became convinced that my wife perfectly mastered the art of seduction. She presented herself differently to each man. With Judge Harris, an innocent creature needing protection; with the police chief, a provocative seductress; with the construction company owner, businesslike and strict, but ready to let herself go. Each of these consultations ended with a continuation, if you understand what I mean. And each, as I gathered from overheard conversations, was recorded on a hidden camera that clients were unaware of. I discovered this equipment on the third day after thoroughly examining the VIP zone, a miniature camera in the eyepiece of an antique porcelain doll standing on a shelf with fabric samples. The transmitter was hidden under the sofa. Professional work, no worse than military grade. "You look tired," Monica remarked at breakfast when I was once again pondering what I'd seen. "Nightmares again." A little, I lied. Everything's fine. Monica met with my brother 3 times that week. Their meetings differed from the sessions with clients, more passion, more candor. I didn't know what hurt more, the infidelity or the fact that with my brother my wife was genuine. With him, she wasn't playing a role. From their conversations, I learned more than I wanted to. "Do you think he suspects anything?" Daniel asked, stroking Monica's bare shoulder. "Alex," she smirked. "He's too busy remembering his heroic exploits to notice what's happening under his nose. I still don't understand why you chose him over me, back then." "Because he saved me, Danny. I owed him my life, and debts must be repaid." I turned off the recording. Too painful. So Monica had chosen me out of a sense of duty, and I had imagined that I'd won her heart. However, this didn't matter now. The important thing, I was beginning to understand the scale of what was happening. My wife and my brother were blackmailing influential city figures, using our atelier as a front. Now the conversations about signed papers, the disproportionately high income, the strange behavior of some clients, and why my brother had suddenly become so successful in obtaining city contracts all made sense. One question remained: what to do next? An ordinary person would go to the police, but the police chief himself was involved in this scheme, and the military had taught me one important principle: before attacking, you need to know all the details of the enemy's position. Damn it, escaped from me. I endured the sight of a cheating wife, could accept her relationships with other men, but my brother, Daniel, was the last straw. Seeing my younger brother carrying on with my wife on a sofa I had paid for with a bonus for eliminating a Taliban field commander was almost physically painful. But I couldn't tear myself away from the screen. "We're taking unnecessary risks," Monica was saying, buttoning her blouse. "He could return at any moment." "Come on, he said he'd be at the bank until 6, Daniel stretched lazily. "Besides, I like risk. You do too, admit it." "I like the money we get, not the risk itself." "There you go again. I told you, after selling the compromising material on the mayor, we'll get enough that you can forget about such entertainment. If you don't mess up this deal like the previous one." "Hey, everything went perfectly with the judge," Daniel jerked as if slapped. "He signed all the construction permits for the Northern District. And Warren, the mayor, has been avoiding our calls for a week. He clearly suspects something." "Let him just try to make a move," Daniel's voice hardened. "We have enough material to destroy his career, marriage, and reputation. He's not going anywhere." I turned off the recording and leaned back in my chair. Mayor Warren, outwardly an impeccable family man, an exemplary politician of the kind who kisses bobbies in public and cuts kindergarten budgets in closed meetings. From overheard conversations, I knew he had a weakness: young girls whom he preferred dressed in school uniforms. Disgusting, but according to the recordings, perfectly legal. All the girls were over 18. Nevertheless, such preferences of the city mayor could end his career. Apparently, Daniel and Monica had first lured him to the atelier with the promise of special services, and then began blackmailing him. And the mayor was resisting, which was atypical for my brother's victims. I became curious. How deeply had Daniel become mired in this scheme? He had always been a clever manipulator, but from blackmail to more serious crimes was just one step. And from what I'd seen, he was already ready to take that step. I fast-forwarded the recording. Daniel and Monica, now they were discussing business. "Alina is starting to ask too many questions," Monica was saying. "She saw me escorting clients through the back door and asked why we don't use the main entrance." "Fire her." "I can't. She's the best seamstress, and without her, we won't be able to maintain the legend of a high-class atelier. Besides, Alex would notice." "Alex, Alex," Daniel mimicked. "Always Alex. You know, sometimes I think, wouldn't it be simpler to just get rid of the heroic brother? An accident, a household injury." "Don't even think about it," Monica jumped up. "Alex doesn't deserve that. He's a good person, and my lawful husband after all." "But you chose me," Daniel smiled smugly. "I didn't choose you. You blackmailed me." "What?" I rewound the recording, thinking I'd misheard. "But no, you blackmailed me." Monica had said it clearly, looking Daniel straight in the eyes. "Oh, come on," he waved dismissively. "I just showed you how to earn money through connections in high circles, and you yourself decided it was an excellent idea. After you threatened to tell Alex about my past, about what happened in captivity, and about my father." I tensed. What past was she talking about? What happened in captivity that I didn't know about? And what did her father have to do with it? "We both know that your grateful rescue story isn't the whole truth." Daniel approached Monica from behind, embracing her shoulders. "If Alex knew what really happened in that cave, what you really felt toward your captors, and who your father was, he wouldn't have accepted you so nobly." "You're a monster, Daniel." "I'm a businessman, and I still have the photos I took in your apartment before you met Alex. Remember the scars on your wrists. Remember what you wrote in your diary about your captivity." Monica was silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. "So let's drop these scenes of indignation," Daniel continued. "We both get what we want. I control half the contracts in the city. You get money and the status of a respected businesswoman. And Brother Deer is happy in his ignorance." I turned off the recording, feeling something new mixing with the cold rage. Regret, pity. Monica wasn't just an adulteress but a victim of blackmail, and in this scheme she was also a pawn. What really happened in captivity? I remembered how reluctantly Monica spoke about those days, limiting herself to generalities. "I wasn't tortured, I was lucky," was all she said. I knew about Stockholm Syndrome, how hostages sometimes begin to sympathize with their captors. Was this sympathy something more? And what photos had Daniel taken? The questions multiplied, but there were no answers. One thing I knew for certain: my brother was much more dangerous than I had assumed, and the depth of his betrayal went far beyond intimacy with my wife. I spent 2 hours in our home gym, methodically destroying the punching bag with a series of strikes honed over years of training. With each blow, with each drop of sweat rolling down my back, I gained clarity of thought. Combat planning had always been my strength. I presented the situation as a tactical problem. Objective: gather maximum information about the enemy, neutralize the threat, minimize my own losses. Enemy: my own brother and wife. Resources: military training, contacts among former comrades, personal savings. Goal: identify the full scale of the criminal scheme and, what then? Turn them over to the authorities, destroy the scheme, or just disappear, leaving them to face the consequences. I didn't know, but one thing was clear: before making a decision, I needed to gather all the information. Over the next few days, I meticulously built a picture of what was happening. On a separate laptop protected from external access, I created a database of all the Atelier's special clients. For each: name, position, weaknesses, frequency of visits, size of presumed bribes or services. I paid special attention to Mayor Warren. Of all the clients, he seemed the most vulnerable yet the most valuable to Daniel. In recent days, he had looked particularly nervous. Through the cameras, I saw him sweating, constantly looking around, jerking at every sound during his last visit. I tracked his routes, habits, contacts. The mayor visited a therapist twice a week, frequently attended church, unusual for a politician of his level, and spent almost no time with his family. Classic signs of a person under pressure. My second object of observation was my brother. I installed a tracker on his car. Fortunately, former comrades could get anything for a reasonable price. Connected to his home Wi-Fi network through a neighboring apartment I rented under a false name. Daniel was smarter than I had assumed. He didn't store compromising material at home or in the office, only on a protected server, accessible through special encryption. But even a genius can't control everything. From overheard conversations, I learned that the original recordings were stored on encrypted flash drives that Daniel kept in a bank-safe deposit box in case of server problems. Monica proved less cautious. In her diary, once forgotten on the kitchen table, I found a list of all meetings with special clients for the month ahead. Next to the names were notes: forced to sign permit for development in the protected zone, for the head of ecology department, block investigation into embezzlement case, for Judge Harris, secure contract for city road repairs, for the deputy mayor. The picture gradually came together. Daniel had built an entire blackmail empire, using my wife's sexual services as a tool for obtaining compromising material. Then this material was used to manipulate officials to obtain contracts, permits, privileges. A simple and effective scheme that had worked for years. But why take such a risk with the mayor? From conversations, I understood that Daniel was preparing some major deal that required Warren's personal approval, and the mayor was clearly resisting, despite the blackmail. Perhaps millions were at stake, or maybe even tens of millions. Warren was the key to the entire puzzle. I decided to focus on him. On Thursday evening, Monica informed me she would be late, problems with the Italian lace delivery. I knew that in reality, she had an appointment with Mayor Warren, who, according to camera records, had ordered another fitting. The perfect moment for surveillance. I parked an inconspicuous gray sedan, rented under a false name, 2 blocks from the Atelier. In the trunk lay a long-focus camera, night vision device, and a surveillance kit, standard tools for a modern paranoid or abandoned husband. Take your pick. It was 9:17 p.m. when the mayor left the Atelier. He looked pale, even under the warm light of street lamps, nervously looking around, constantly checking his phone. He got into a black SUV with tinted windows and moved off, breaking 2 traffic rules when leaving the parking lot. I followed him, maintaining a safe distance. Tracking in the city is the art of remaining inconspicuous in the flow of cars without losing sight of the target. I had done this in countries where the slightest mistake could cost you your life, so tracking a nervous politician in my hometown was almost a vacation. The mayor's SUV turned onto the highway leading to the suburbs. Half an hour later, we arrived at the gates of the elite village, Forest Hills. 20 mansions behind a high fence with round-the-clock security. I knew that Warren's house was deep inside this paradise for the wealthy. Leaving the car at a nearby shopping center, I crossed the forest belt separating the village from the rest of the world. The perimeter was well protected: cameras, motion sensors, regular patrols. But any system has its weak points. In this case, the flow of food delivery service regularly circulating through the main gates. I put on a delivery service jacket picked up from a container behind a restaurant, with the intention to return it later, of course, attached a fake badge, and took a pizza bag in hand. The guard at the gate barely glanced at me and let me inside. The mayor's house, a 3-story mansion in colonial style with white columns and impeccably trimmed bushes, looked like an architectural embodiment of the American dream. I positioned myself in the shadow of a neighbor's hedge, observing what was happening through a camera with an infrared lens. At 10:40 p.m., an inconspicuous black sedan stopped at Warren's house. My brother got out, holding a small metal case in his hands. He rang the doorbell, and the mayor personally let him in. On Daniel's face played a self-satisfied smile that I knew so well from childhood, the smile of a man who got what he wanted. The meeting lasted only 15 minutes. Through the large windows of the living room, I saw Daniel hand the mayor a small package, presumably a flash drive. In return, he received a case which he immediately opened. Even from my position, I could see it contained stacks of cash. My brother seemed satisfied. He nodded, closed the case, and headed for the exit. The mayor escorted him to the door, then returned to the living room. Through the driver's window, I saw Daniel, sitting in the car, make a phone call. Judging by the length of the conversation, a short phrase perhaps, "It's done," or something similar, after which he drove away. I remained to observe the mayor's house. Something in his behavior made me wary. He didn't look like a man who had just bought off a blackmailer. Rather, like someone who had made a difficult decision. And I was right. An hour later, lights in the house began to go out, first on the second floor, then in the living room. Only in the study on the first floor did light continue to burn. I changed position to better see what was happening. The mayor sat at his desk, with a sheet of paper before him on which he was writing something. When finished, he carefully folded the sheet and sealed it in an envelope. Then he opened a desk drawer and took out a pistol, checked the magazine, racked the slide, took off the safety. "Damn," I murmured, realizing what was about to happen. I rushed toward the house but knew I wouldn't make it. Through the camera lens, I saw the mayor put the pistol to his temple. A moment's hesitation, a deep breath, closed eyes. Then, a flash and a dark stain on the wall behind him. The alarm sirens howled about 30 seconds later. I quickly retreated through the neighboring property, crossed the forest belt, and returned to the car. Adrenaline pulsed in my temples, but my thinking remained cold and clear. I had just witnessed the mayor's suicide, and possibly understood why Daniel had hurried to get the money. He knew that Warren was on the edge, and rushed to squeeze the last he could out of him. Chapter 2: Ashes of Truth. Death often becomes a catalyst, exposing the hidden springs of life. After the mayor's suicide, my hunt transformed from personal revenge into something much greater. I knew well that between the moment a person pulls the trigger and the photograph of a smiling politician in a mourning frame with the caption, "Suddenly died of a heart attack," lies a whole world of manipulation, power, and control. Someone really needed to ensure that the true cause of Warren's death remained a secret. And I intended to find out exactly who. The cordon around Warren's mansion was removed after 2 days. I monitored this from the same sedan, from the same position at the shopping center. Police cars departed one after another. The ambulance had long since taken the body. Several times I saw detectives, photographers, and forensic experts entering and leaving the house. The official investigation. Official and absolutely fake. Returning home, I turned on the local news. A commentator with sincere sorrow in his voice announced the untimely demise of one of the most promising politicians in our state. Next to him sat the chief pathologist of the city, with a gentle smile explaining that the death was caused by acute heart failure due to stress, a common problem among workaholics. The same pathologist who, according to our camera records, had visited the Atelier twice in the last month for special fittings. Sad, isn't it? Monica stood in the doorway of the living room, arms crossed over her chest. He always seemed so healthy. Appearances can be deceptive. I looked up from the screen. You, for example, seem saddened. Something flashed in her eyes, fear, suspicion. I am saddened, Alex. Mayor Warren was our client, a regular client. Yes, I nodded. He was an unusual man. Constantly ordered lingerie, but his wife never appeared for fittings. Strange, don't you think? Monica was silent, studying my face with the wariness with which a predator evaluates a potential threat. We were both playing the same game, testing the waters, trying to understand what the opponent knew. He was a secretive person. His position demanded it, she finally answered. Perhaps he was embarrassed by his tastes. Or maybe he was afraid, I shrugged. What do you think, Monica? Did he have reasons to be afraid? Now I was almost certain. Fear flashed in her eyes, but just for a second. Years of practice had made my wife a first-class actress. Why are you asking? She moved closer, sitting on the couch, placing her hand on my shoulder. Alex, you've been acting strange these last few days. Has something happened? Her hand on my shoulder was warm, but I felt this warmth as something abstract, mechanical. A month ago, I would have covered her hand with mine, kissed her fingers, inhaled the aroma of her wrist. Now I just forced the corners of my lips to twitch in a conditional smile. Nothing special, just thinking about how fragile life is. Today you're the mayor of the city, tomorrow just a line in an obituary. You have such a grim outlook on life. Her fingers gently massaged my neck, that very spot that usually tensed during missions. Maybe we could go somewhere tonight, have dinner at La Maison. I heard they have a new chef. I have a meeting with a security systems provider, I lied. Want to update the camera software. After that incident with the aggressive client, I can't sleep peacefully. You never sleep peacefully anyway. Her voice contained almost genuine care. All right, another time then. She left, trailing a scent of French perfume behind her. I noted that Monica didn't even ask what was wrong with the already installed cameras. This was telling. She clearly avoided that topic. A bit later, monitoring the cameras from the Atelier, I noticed that Monica conducted an unscheduled special consultation with Judge Harris. They didn't engage in sex, just talked, with the judge looking tense and constantly wiping sweat from his forehead. I zoomed in on his lips, trying to make out the words. Sure that the cameras aren't recording? Harris was asking. Monica nodded, soothingly stroking his hand. Done perfectly, no one will suspect, pathologist's conclusion. The judge sighed with relief and handed her an envelope. Now the puzzle was coming together. Judge Harris, apparently, had organized the falsification of the autopsy results. The suicide note had disappeared, the true cause of death concealed. Daniel's influence was much broader than I had initially assumed. Mayor Warren wasn't just a blackmail victim. He was an example of what happens to those who try to oppose the system. Over the next week, I created a complete picture of the activities of all the Atelier's special clients. The technique was simple: external surveillance, access to electronic correspondence, phone call interception. The latter, of course, was on the edge of legality, but when your brother is engaged in blackmailing the city elite, and your wife provides specific services for this, the concept of legality acquires some flexibility. One evening, checking financial flows, I discovered something that affected me personally. My military pension and business investments, everything I had put into our joint business with Monica, had been skillfully redirected by my brother to offshore accounts. In the Cayman Islands, I suddenly discovered assets worth just over $1 million, of which I had no idea. Daniel wasn't just using my wife. He was using me too, my name, my reputation, my money. The family business turned out to be a facade for laundering funds obtained from blackmail and corruption. I sat in front of the screen, looking at statements from offshore accounts, feeling cold rage growing inside. This was no longer just betrayal. It was systematic, cold-blooded use of a person whom my brother, in theory, should have loved and respected. Yet I contained my anger. Military training taught me to control emotions, transforming them into icy determination. I continued playing the role of an unsuspecting husband and brother, while gathering information about all participants in the scheme, their weaknesses, leverage points. Information, that was my weapon, and like any weapon, it required proper use. Mr. Rayner, could I have a moment? Alina's voice, our seamstress, was quieter than usual. She stood at the entrance to my office, nervously fingering the edge of her blouse. Of course, Alina, come in. I set aside the papers I was reviewing. Has something happened? The girl looked back as if checking if someone was watching her, then closed the door and approached my desk. Real concern was written on her pale face. I don't know if I should talk about this, she began, lowering her gaze, but I think it's important. It's all right, I indicated a chair. Sit down and tell me what's troubling you. Alina sat on the edge of the chair. She was about 28, had come from Eastern Europe about 5 years ago. A talented seamstress with golden hands, she created true works of art from lace and silk. Monica valued her for her craftsmanship, but, as I noticed, kept her at a distance. Alina was the only employee never invited to our corporate parties. Yesterday I stayed late finishing an urgent order for Mrs. Henderson, Alina began. Everyone had already left, even Lillian. I was alone. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The workshop ran out of gold thread, and I went to the storeroom for a new spool. There in the corner stands an old mannequin that's not usually used. The girl lowered her voice to a whisper. I accidentally bumped into it and it fell. This fell out of it. Elena took a small flash card from her pocket. I didn't mean to, really, she added hastily. But I got curious. I inserted it into my laptop. I tensed. If this flash drive contained compromising material recorded by Daniel. And what did you see there? Videos, Alina lowered her gaze. Many videos with clients. They were engaging with Mrs. Rayner. Her cheeks reddened, but not from embarrassment, rather from indignation and fear. And there was Judge Harris. I recognized him. He sentenced my cousin to 5 years for a theft he didn't commit. And in the video, the judge, I understand, I interrupted her. There was no need to make the girl recount the details. Alina, have you shown this flash drive to anyone else? No, she shook her head energetically. I immediately thought I should bring it to you. You didn't. You didn't know about this, right? I didn't see you in any of these videos, so I assumed. There was hope in her eyes. Hope that the boss she respected wasn't involved in dirty business. I felt sorry for her. Elena was an honest person in a business built on lies. No, I didn't know. I extended my hand. May I? She gave me the flash drive, and I put it in my pocket. Thank you for telling me. This is a serious matter, and I promise to look into it. But for now, let's keep this between us, all right? For the safety of the business and all employees. Of course, Elena nodded. I won't tell anyone, but it's not right what they're doing. It's blackmail, isn't it? Seems that way. I looked her straight in the eyes. Elena, be careful. Don't discuss this with anyone, especially Mrs. Rayner or her brother. I'm handling this matter. She rose, still pale but somewhat calmer. Thank you, Mr. Rayner. I knew I could trust you. After she left, I inserted the flash drive into the computer, viewing the contents through a secure connection. There were indeed dozens of videos with special consultations. Judging by the file dates, this was an archive for the last 2 months. So somewhere there was a whole collection of similar flash drives with earlier recordings. What concerned me was something else. Elena had learned too much. In a normal situation, this could be resolved with dismissal and a non-disclosure agreement. But my brother's scheme went far beyond normal business. At stake were millions of dollars, the reputations of influential people, freedom, and even lives. I decided to talk to Elena again tomorrow, to convince her to take a vacation, maybe even offer a paid trip home to Europe until I sorted out the situation. But I was too late. I heard the fire siren while returning from external surveillance of the police chief. The fiery glow over the city center was visible from afar. As I approached, it grew brighter, and the wail of fire engines was joined by police sirens. I didn't immediately realize that it was our atelier burning. There were several businesses in the block. But when I turned the corner and saw flames erupting from familiar windows, something broke inside. I parked across the street, watching firefighters battle the flames. Passers-by filmed the scene on their phones. Police cordoned off the perimeter, preventing anyone from approaching the burning building. Several of our employees huddled together nearby. I noticed Lillian, 2 saleswomen, a security guard. Alex, a familiar voice made me turn around. Monica was running toward me across the street, her face pale, real horror in her eyes. Thank God you're here. I was afraid you were inside. She threw herself on my neck, and I mechanically embraced her. The body reacted faster than the mind. 5 years of marriage had created reflexes that weren't so easy to suppress. I was at the supplier's, I answered. What happened? Nobody knows, Monica sniffled. Lillian closed the shop, everyone left. Firefighters say possibly an electrical short circuit. Was anyone hurt? She looked away, and I knew the answer before she spoke. Elena, she stayed late, working on Mrs. Radford's order. Cold spread through my veins. This couldn't be a coincidence. In the morning, Elena told me about the flash drive with compromising material. In the evening, the atelier burns, and she turns out to be the only victim. Are you sure? My voice sounded hoarse. Maybe she managed to get out. Firefighters found. Monica didn't finish the sentence. They said she most likely suffocated from smoke before. I hugged my wife tighter, looking over her head at the burning building. Cold rage was growing inside. Elena had died because she accidentally learned the truth. Her death wasn't an accident. I was absolutely certain of that. How long ago did the fire start? I asked, pulling away. About an hour ago. The security company called me. Monica wiped away tears. I came right away, tried to call you. I was in the shopping center basement. There's no signal there, I lied, remembering that I had indeed turned off my phone during surveillance of the police chief. Did you call Daniel? Yes, he'll be here soon. She looked at me with a strange mixture of emotions. Alex, what do we do now? All our designs, materials, archives. Insurance will cover the damage, I replied mechanically, thinking of something else. The main thing is that most people weren't hurt. I surveyed the street as if looking for someone, and found them. In the shadow of the building opposite stood a dark sedan with tinted windows, too new and expensive for this area. In the lowered window of the driver's door, a familiar profile flashed for a second. Daniel was watching the fire from a distance, not rushing to approach, not hurrying to save his sister's business, just watching as fire destroyed evidence, as the body of a woman who knew too much burned. In that moment, I realized that my brother had crossed a line beyond which no excuses existed, and I was going to make him answer for it. Later that night, when we returned home, and Monica, exhausted by stress, fell asleep, I checked Daniel's office through remote access to his video surveillance system. The cameras showed him urgently clearing the premises of documents. All folders and files were collected in several large boxes and carried out, covering tracks or preparing for something more massive. In any case, the situation had transformed from personal revenge into a matter of justice. Elena, a 28-year-old refugee who had found a new life in America, was killed just for accidentally learning the truth. She left behind an 8-year-old son, now an orphan. I could no longer be just an observer. It was time to act. Chapter 3: Turbulent Waters. There exists a point of no return, a moment when making a decision becomes inevitable. For me, that moment came when I sat in Marcus Shadow Delaney's salon as he applied makeup to transform me from Lieutenant Colonel Alex Rayner into a Hungarian collector of salacious materials. Cold determination filled my mind completely. I was no longer a betrayed husband with a broken heart. I became a soldier with a mission. All the preparation, all the years of training returned as if I had never left the service. Nothing remained except the objective and the paths to achieve it. Marcus leaned closer, applying silicone attachments to my face. The cheekbone contour needs to be changed more, he said. This Istvan Kovacs, whom you're planning to become, should have a more angular jaw. I sat motionless, looking in the mirror at my transformation. Now my face resembled a canvas on which an artist step by step created a new person. Did you get what I asked for? I asked, trying not to move my lips. Everything you need is in that case. Marcus nodded toward a metal briefcase in the corner of the room. The documents are flawless. The weapon is compact but effective. German Sig Sauer P365, 2 magazines. Undetectable by standard metal detectors, composite materials body. And communication equipment, including a miniature camera disguised as a cufflink. In reserve, there's also a beacon, smoke bombs, and a couple of other surprises. You've always been foresighted. And you've always been too trusting. Marcus stepped back a pace, evaluating his work. Never thought I'd say this, but I think you shouldn't go there alone. I can assemble a team. No, I shook my head. This is personal. That's the problem. Marcus wiped his hands with a cloth. Personal matters distort reasoning. You always taught us to act with a cool head. My head is cool enough. I stood up from the chair, stretching stiff muscles. Problems arise when emotions enter the game, and I don't have any left. The last phrase sounded so lifeless that Marcus momentarily froze, studying my face. Then he nodded to his own thoughts. You resemble the Rainer I knew in Kandahar, the one about whom legends circulated among the rookies. He approached a closet and took out a dark suit. Try this on. It's handmade, a real Hungarian tailor. István Kovács wouldn't wear something mass-produced. The suit fit perfectly, as if it had been tailored specifically for me. Marcus added finishing touches, a couple of rings on my fingers, a gold watch, a cane with an ivory knob which, I suspected, concealed some kind of weapon. Now you're a genuine European aristocrat with bad inclinations, he grinned. How about the accent? No problem, I replied with a heavy Eastern European accent. I have operational experience in Budapest. Damn, even I almost believed it. Marcus slapped me on the shoulder. Don't mess up there. Not planning to. A boat was waiting for me at the pier. A man in a white suit checked the list and, finding István Kovács's name, gestured for me to board. I settled into a soft seat, watching as other guests, wealthy men in expensive suits and jewelry, seated themselves around. Some arrived with companions, bodyguards, or assistants. I deliberately came alone, fewer reasons for suspicion. The boat cast off. The shoreline began to recede. After 20 minutes, we approached a huge yacht glittering with lights in the evening twilight. Fortune lived up to its name, a snow-white beauty at least 80 meters long, 4 decks, a helicopter pad on the stern. Along the sides, figures of guards were visible. One by one, guests ascended the gangway, passing through a metal detector frame and additional checks with handheld scanners. My turn. I presented my invitation and passport with a slight haughty smile, as befitted an eccentric aristocrat. Your weapon, sir. The guard extended his hand. I don't carry weapons, I spread my hands. It's not my style. The handheld scanner showed nothing. Marcus hadn't lied about the composite material. I was admitted on board. On the upper deck, staff in impeccable white uniforms greeted us with trays of champagne. I took a glass but didn't drink. I needed an absolutely clear head. Around, guests mingled, conversing quietly. The air was filled with the scent of expensive cigars, perfume, and a barely perceptible aroma of decadence. I slowly walked around the deck, assessing the situation. Approximately 30 guests, not counting the staff. Security, at least 15 men, all armed, many with the characteristic bearing of former military. 4 exits to the lower decks, 2 emergency ladders. On the stern, lifeboats and rafts. And then I saw her. Monica stood by the railing in an evening gown the color of burgundy with a deep back cutout. Her hair was gathered in an elegant bun, exposing her neck. Next to her was a middle-aged man in a strict dark suit, presumably that federal prosecutor kind. He carried himself stiffly, constantly looking around. I turned away, not wanting my wife to notice my gaze despite the makeup. Instead, I concentrated on another target, my brother, who at that moment was ascending a small platform in the center of the deck. Daniel was in top form, a snow-white suit, confident smile, perfect haircut, a real master of the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel's voice spread across the deck, amplified by an invisible microphone. Welcome aboard the Fortune. The guests turned to him, and conversations died down. Daniel surveyed everyone with his gaze, momentarily lingering on each face. Acting ability had always been his strong point. Today you will participate in a special auction. Here, away from prying eyes, you will be able to acquire what cannot be purchased for any money in the ordinary world. He made a dramatic pause. Information, the most valuable commodity of modern times. An approving whisper ran through the crowd. Daniel continued. Before beginning the bidding, allow me to remind you of the rules. First, what happens on the fortune stays on the fortune. Second, all transactions are conducted through cryptocurrency via closed channels. Third, the auction winner receives exclusive rights to all information on the lot, including source materials. Fourth, and most important, he smiled broadly, enjoy the evening. And now I invite you to the main salon, where bidding will soon begin. The guests moved toward the central entrance leading inside the yacht. I waited until the main mass of people went forward and joined the flow, keeping to the side. The interior of the fortune impressed with luxury, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, panels of rare wood species. The main salon was decorated in the style of an opera theater, with a platform for the auctioneer in the center and rows of soft chairs for guests. I chose a place in the far corner from where I could see the entire hall well. To my right sat a corpulent man, constantly wiping sweat from his bald head. To my left, a thin gentleman with an aquiline profile, not letting go of his tablet. Behind the chairs, along the walls, were guards, two at each exit. One caught my attention, tall, with a military haircut and a scar crossing his right eyebrow. On his lapel was a tiny badge of the Marines, probably the head of security. Our gazes met momentarily, and I sensed professional curiosity from him. He didn't recognize me, but something in my posture or gaze triggered his instincts. I averted my eyes and began examining the other guests. Some I recognized: businessmen, politicians, media owners. Monica and the prosecutor sat in the third row, closer to the center. She was whispering something in his ear, while he smiled tensely, maintaining distance. A gray-haired man in a tuxedo ascended the platform, a professional auctioneer, judging by his polished movements. Beside him stood a technician, setting up a large screen on the wall behind. "Good evening, esteemed guests." The auctioneer's voice was deep and melodious. "Today 10 unique lots will be presented for your attention. You may place bids using the tablets before you. To preserve anonymity, each of you has been assigned a number. The starting price of each lot is indicated on the screen. The bidding increment is 10% of the current bid." He signaled to the technician, and the first image appeared on the screen: a photograph of a local businessman holding a hefty package, evidently containing drugs. Lot number 1, Edward Green, CEO of Green Valley Investments. Materials include video recordings and photographs of his meetings with known drug dealers, as well as bank statements proving money laundering. Starting price, $50,000. Numbers on a special board began changing, displaying rising bids. The bidding was lively. I observed carefully, trying to understand which of those present was particularly interested in compromising material on specific individuals. The next few lots proceeded in a similar fashion: local celebrities, businessmen, mid-level politicians. Bids grew, but remained within reasonable limits. This was clearly just a warm-up before the main lots. "Monsieur Kovacs, is it not a wonderful evening today?" My neighbor on the right unexpectedly addressed me in French. "Most educational," I replied in the same language, maintaining a Hungarian accent. "Is this your first time at such an event?" His eyes studied my face attentively. "In this country, yes. In Europe, such entertainments are more prevalent." The man nodded understandingly and switched his attention to the screen, where a new lot appeared. I noticed that the security chief with the scar was observing our brief conversation. "And now, esteemed audience, I present for your attention a special lot," announced the auctioneer after a small break. "The materials we are about to show have not only commercial but also strategic value." I tensed, anticipating something bad. On the screen appeared an image of a luxurious living room, our living room, and in the frame, myself with a glass of whiskey in hand, noticeably intoxicated, and Monica sitting next to me on the sofa. "Please turn on the sound for the demonstration," said the auctioneer. I heard my own voice, slightly slurred. It was a complete mess there. 7 men against a company, and that idiot from intelligence gave us wrong coordinates. We were supposed to destroy a chemical weapons warehouse, but instead nearly blew up a school. The recording continued, with me describing a completely classified operation in Syria, including agent names, object coordinates, procedure details. This was an operation from 2 years ago, about which only a few people in the Pentagon knew. I felt my fingers going numb. Monica had recorded me, in our own home, at a moment when I was most vulnerable, drunk, tormented by nightmares, seeking human warmth and understanding. The lot represents a complete recording of confessions from a former lieutenant colonel of a special unit about secret operations in Syria, Iran, and Afghanistan, continued the auctioneer. Materials include information about methods of penetration into guarded facilities, interrogation techniques, target eliminations, as well as names and coordinates of active operatives. An excited whisper ran through the hall. Such information was worth millions and was of interest not only to the tabloid press, but also to foreign intelligence services. "Starting price, $1 million, announced the auctioneer. I saw Morgan stir at the far wall, casting a quick glance at my brother. On Daniel's face played a self-satisfied smile. I searched for Monica with my eyes, but she wasn't in the hall. Apparently, she was performing her special assignment with the prosecutor. Bids rose quickly. 2 million, 3, 4, 5. The recording continued playing. Now I was talking about a failed operation to capture an Iranian nuclear scientist. With each word, my position became increasingly hopeless. If this recording reached the media, a tribunal awaited me. If it reached foreign intelligence services, people would die. The price reached 7 million when I made my decision. I needed to act immediately. I raised my hand, attracting the auctioneer's attention. "I have a technical problem with my tablet," I said with a heavy Hungarian accent. "I cannot place a bid." "Someone will help you right away, sir." The auctioneer nodded to one of the staff. A young man in a white uniform approached me. I showed him the tablet. "See, it's not responding." I tapped my finger on the screen. "Allow me to." He didn't finish, as at that moment everything went awry. From one of the entrances came loud voices. Several men in Coast Guard uniforms entered the hall, weapons in hand. Guests froze. A woman quietly cried out. Daniel quickly ascended the platform beside the auctioneer. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm." His voice sounded confident. "These are our friends from the Coast Guard. They're here to provide additional security for the event." Morgan rose from his seat and approached the newcomers, exchanging brief remarks with them. Guests gradually calmed down, returning to their places. I, however, understood that the situation had sharply complicated. Now there was an entire detachment of armed men on the yacht, probably corrupted or mercenaries in Coast Guard uniforms. I needed to change the plan. "As you can see, our security is under reliable protection." Daniel took the floor again. "Let's continue the auction. Where were we? Ah yes, 7,200,000 for unique military information." The guards in Coast Guard uniforms positioned themselves along the walls, 2 at each exit, all armed with pistols, some with short-barreled automatic weapons concealed under their uniform jackets. Professionals, judging by their bearing and movements. One of them, a balding man with a square jaw, scrutinized the guests. His gaze lingered on me a bit longer than on the others. I felt a chill of alarm. Something in my disguise or behavior had aroused his suspicions. The bidding continued. The price for my military secret reached 9 million when the man with the square jaw began slowly approaching my seat. Casually, as if just patrolling the hall, but I knew he was coming for me. I quickly calculated options. If he merely suspected me of something, better to stay put and play the role. If he somehow knew who I was, there was no choice. I activated a smoke bomb and dropped it on the floor. 3 seconds later, the hall began filling with thick smoke. Screams, panic, people jumping from their seats. I used the commotion to change position, moving closer to the side exit. Everyone remained calm. Daniel's voice broke through the noise. It's just a technical malfunction. The guards tried to restore order, but the smoke grew thicker. At this moment, I noticed Daniel being hurriedly escorted through the opposite door by 2 guards. He was heading toward the captain's bridge. I couldn't let him escape. I used the smoke's cover to slip unnoticed through the side door. Finding myself in the corridor, I quickly oriented myself. According to the yacht's layout, studied in advance, there was a shorter path to the bridge through service areas. Making my way through corridors, I heard orders being given over the internal communication system about finding the source of smoke and a possible intruder. Time was short. At a turn, I encountered a lone guard. There was no time for reflection. 2 quick movements, a neck hold and precise pressure on the carotid artery. After 7 seconds, he went limp in my arms. I dragged the body into the nearest closet and took his weapon, a standard Glock 19. Moving further, I heard familiar voices from behind a half-open door. Approaching cautiously, I saw Monica and Prosecutor Kine in a small conference room. They weren't engaged in special services, rather having an intense conversation. Kine seemed nervous, constantly checking his watch. "Time is running out," he was saying. "The capture group is awaiting the signal." "Give me 10 more minutes," Monica insisted. "We need to wait until they exhibit the compromising material on the Supreme Court judge. That's the key element." I froze. Capture group. Monica was working with Kine. But who then were these people in Coast Guard uniforms? And what was Daniel waiting for, having hastily left the auction? The situation was becoming increasingly complex. I continued moving toward the bridge, trying to make sense of the new information. If Kine was truly a federal agent undercover, and not just another blackmail victim, this changed the entire picture. Ahead appeared another guard. I hid around the corner, letting him pass. But at the last moment he turned, the same one with the square jaw who had suspected me in the hall. "Hey," he reached for his weapon. I lunged forward, reducing the distance to a dangerous minimum. His pistol was already halfway out of the holster when I struck him in the solar plexus. He doubled over but didn't fall, a trained fighter. His left fist aimed for my liver. I blocked the blow and performed a wrist lock, twisting his arm. There was a crack. The joint couldn't withstand it. The man cried out but immediately tried to reach for his weapon with his right hand. I headbutted him in the bridge of the nose. Blood gushed from his broken nose, but he continued resisting. I had to act more forcefully, 2 powerful blows to the jaw, and the opponent finally lost consciousness. The entire fight took less than 15 seconds, but the noise could attract attention. I hurried onward, knowing that now the count was in minutes. 2 turns and a staircase remained to the bridge when a powerful explosion shook the ship. The lights in the corridor went out. A moment later, emergency lighting came on. The alarm siren howled, drowning out the cries of panic from the lower decks. I quickened my pace, leaping over steps. The next explosion, stronger, caused the yacht to list. Plaster showered from the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance came the sound of breaking glass. The door to the bridge was locked. I shot the lock and burst inside, holding the pistol before me. "Don't move," I shouted. On the bridge were 4 people. The captain, leaning over a radio station, 2 crew members, and Daniel, holding a phone between his ear and shoulder while his hands quickly sorted through some documents. All froze at the sight of a weapon. Step away from the radio. I aimed the pistol at the captain. And put your hands on the panel where I can see them. The captain slowly obeyed. Daniel, however, seemed surprisingly calm. Who are you? He asked. What do you want? Shut up, Daniel. I tore off the facial attachments with one movement. His eyes widened in shock, recognition, disbelief, and then strange relief. Alex, somehow I knew it would be you. He lowered the phone, always appearing at the most inconvenient moment. The most convenient for justice. I kept him in my sights. Game over. You'll answer for Elena's death, for the mayor, for everything. Elena, he looked genuinely puzzled. Ah, the seamstress, that was an accident, electrical wiring. Don't lie to me, I stepped forward. I saw you near the Atelier during the fire. You were watching. Of course I was watching. It was my sister's business, but I didn't set the fire. He shook his head. You think worse of me than I actually am. The ship shuddered again. Somewhere on the lower decks a fire was raging. I could smell smoke. What's happening? I nodded toward the radio. Who was the captain calling? Trying to call for help. Someone blew up the engine room. Daniel looked troubled but not panicking. The ship is sinking, Alex. We need to evacuate. Nobody is going anywhere until I get answers. Where are the recordings? Where's the compromising material? On servers, in a special storage on the lower deck. But it doesn't matter anymore. Everything will burn in a few minutes. Before I could reply, the bridge door flew open. On the threshold stood a man in a bloodied shirt, Federal Prosecutor Kine. In his hand he held a pistol. Federal Bureau of Investigation, he shouted, aiming his weapon at Daniel. Everyone on the floor. Another hero, muttered Daniel. It's just a superhero convention today. You are under arrest. Kine paid no attention to me, focusing completely on Daniel. You have the right to remain silent. What the hell is going on here? I looked at Kine. Who are you really? Robert Kine, Special Agent FBI. He finally looked at me. For the past 6 months, I've been investigating your brother's corruption network. And you, I presume, are Alex Rayner. Your wife told me a lot about you. My wife, Monica, works for us, became an informant after the mayor's death. Kine nodded briefly. She couldn't tell you the truth to avoid putting you in danger. I felt the floor slipping from under my feet, and it wasn't just due to the yachts list. Monica was on the side of the law. Daniel laughed. God, what irony. You thought she betrayed you, but she was saving your ass. He turned to Kine. By the way, Agent, those guys in Coast Guard uniforms who just arrived, not yours. What? Kine frowned. What guys? Jason Morgan brought his team. Daniel shrugged. I plan to use them for forceful support when collecting additional contributions from some guests. As if confirming his words, sounds of gunshots came from the lower deck. We need to find Monica. I stepped toward the exit. Where is she? Last saw her by the lifeboats, replied Kine. She was helping evacuate guests. A new explosion shook the yacht, this time stronger than the previous ones. The ship listed even more. The ship will hold no more than 15 minutes, said the captain, looking at the instruments. The lower decks are already flooded. I made a decision. Kine, you arrest my brother and evacuate. I'll find Monica. Fair enough, nodded the agent, taking out handcuffs. Daniel Rayner, you are under arrest. I didn't hear the end of the phrase, already running out of the bridge. Chaos reigned in the corridors, smoke, screams, running people. The yacht had turned into a sinking hell. The path to the lifeboats proved more difficult than I had anticipated. The corridors of the lower deck were already partially flooded. In some places, I had to move knee-deep in water. Smoke from the fire in the engine room made breathing and visibility difficult. I encountered a group of panicking guests trying to find an exit. Among them was that same French diplomat who had sat next to me during the auction. This way, I shouted, pointing to an emergency exit. There's some woman asking for help. I knew it was a cruel trick, but the diplomat was a well-known pedophile, protected by diplomatic immunity. He'd never been prosecuted for his crimes against dozens of children. Let him work off at least a fraction of his karma. The deck was almost vertical when I finally reached the lifeboats. Most were already gone. A few people were climbing into the last one, and among them, Monica helping an elderly woman. "Monica," I called out. She turned around, disbelief and joy mixing on her face. "Alex." I reached the boat, and she grasped my hand. "Get in," she shouted over the noise of the fire and crashing waves. "We're about to launch." I climbed into the boat, filled with a dozen survivors. Crew members were hurriedly preparing it for lowering. Monica clung to me as if afraid I might disappear. "I tried to find you," she whispered. "I was so afraid." "It's all right," I held her. "I'm here now." The boat began its descent toward the turbulent sea. The yacht, engulfed in flames, was rapidly sinking. Explosions continued to tear through its hull. We were less than 10 meters from the water when one particularly powerful blast rocked the entire vessel. The lifeboat cables jerked, and then one broke. The boat swung sharply, throwing several people overboard. Another jerk, and the second cable gave way. We fell, hitting the water with such force that the air was knocked from my lungs. Cold seawater instantly flooded the boat. I saw Monica's terrified face for a moment before a wave washed over us. Then darkness. Chapter 4: The Price of Redemption. Some say that in moments of mortal danger, your entire life flashes before your eyes. Not true. When our lifeboat capsized from the blast wave, I saw only black water and Monica's frightened eyes. Just a moment, and we were back in the hell of the sinking yacht, clinging to debris, trying to survive. There were no regrets about the past, no fear of the future. Only the harsh present and the necessity to act. Perhaps this is the secret of survival in any critical situation, not to think, but to do. Not to remember, but to move forward. "Alex," Monica's cry barely pierced through the roar of flames and crashing structures. I grabbed her hand, pulling her from the water that had flooded the yacht's lower deck. No more than 10 minutes had passed since the first explosion, but the Fortune had already turned into a floating hell. Fire consumed the upper decks, water filled the lower compartments. Between these two elements darted all living things, panicking guests, crew members, security. "We need to climb higher away from the fire," I shouted, remembering the yacht's layout studied before the operation. Monica nodded, clinging to my hand. Her evening gown had turned to tatters, her hair was matted with seawater, but her eyes remained clear. No panic, no hysteria, only determination to survive. In this moment, I again saw in her that woman I had admired 6 years ago. We moved through the flooded corridor, holding onto pipes under the ceiling, when we stumbled upon a body, a man in Coast Guard uniform with a bullet-riddled chest. Beside him, leaning against the wall and pressing his hand to a bloody side, sat Prosecutor Kine. "Rayner," he grimaced, trying to smile, "thought you both had already left this ship." I knelt beside him. "You're wounded." "Trifles," he coughed, spitting blood. "Been worse, your brother slipped away from me. These pseudo-guards came to save him." Kine looked at Monica with a long gaze. "Did you tell your husband?" "Not everything," she replied quietly. "There wasn't time." "Tell me now," I demanded. Kine reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pistol. "Back up, take it." He handed me the weapon. "Monica worked for us the past month, after the mayor's suicide. She realized the situation had spiraled out of control, contacted the FBI. "Why didn't you tell me?" I turned to my wife. "To protect you," Monica looked me straight in the eyes. "Daniel threatened to expose my past and set you up. I couldn't lose you." A new explosion shook the yacht. Plaster rained from the ceiling. The water level in the corridor rose. "We don't have much time," Kine tried to stand but couldn't. "Go, find your brother and the documents. We can't let him escape." "And you?" I'll only slow you down. He placed a magnetic card in my hand. This is a master key to all doors. Be careful, at least 10 of Morgan's armed men remain. I understood he was right. We had no time or ability to transport a wounded man through flooded compartments. We'll try to come back for you, I said. Kine smirked. No heroics, Rayner, just complete the mission. He looked at Monica. You chose correctly, Monica. He's the best of the three of you. We left Kine with his pistol and radio, hoping he would contact rescuers. The probability of this was negligible, but there were no alternatives. Deck A was already completely at the mercy of flames. We climbed higher to the upper deck, where the cocktail reception had been held before the auction. Now chaos and darkness reigned there. Electricity worked intermittently. Shadows of escaping people flitted around. Daniel should still be in the captain's bridge, said Monica, clinging to a railing. The yacht had listed even more steeply. Standing upright was becoming increasingly difficult. He always said that in case of problems, it's exactly there. She didn't finish. From the shadows emerged 3 figures in Coast Guard uniforms. Leading them was Morgan, the same head of the detachment I had seen at the auction. Well, well, look who's here, Morgan grinned, aiming his assault rifle at Monica. The traitor and her heroic husband. I drew Kine's pistol, but 3 against 1 in a confined space was not the best odds, even for a Special Forces lieutenant colonel. Drop the weapon, Rayner, Morgan stepped forward, or your wife dies first. I calculated options. 3 opponents. 2 stand too close to each other, 1 shot can only take out 1. Morgan keeps apart, knows tactics, but the surroundings, the tilted deck, poor lighting, unstable structures, this could be used. All right, I slowly bent down, pretending I was going to put down the pistol. Instead, with a sharp movement, I kicked a fire hose from its wall mounting. A jet of water under pressure struck the 2 guards standing together, throwing them against the railings. Simultaneously, I fired at Morgan but missed. The yacht jerked at the moment of the shot. Morgan returned fire. A short burst riddled the bulkhead centimeters from my head. I rolled behind a metal equipment box, pulling Monica with me. No point in resisting, Rayner, shouted Morgan. The ship is sinking. Daniel is already preparing his escape route. Without him, you're all dead here. I noticed a metal fragment of the hull, torn off during the explosion. An excellent improvised weapon. When I say now, run to that door, I whispered to Monica, pointing to an emergency exit 10 meters from us. She nodded, squeezing my hand. I waited until Morgan approached our shelter, then leapt out to meet him, hurling the metal fragment at him. He instinctively recoiled, raising his rifle, but I was faster. A kick knocked the weapon from his hands. The next blow broke his knee. Morgan screamed in pain, falling to the deck. The other 2 guards, recovering from the water jet, began raising their weapons. Now, I shouted to Monica, simultaneously lunging at the nearest guard. The struggle was fierce and brief. Years of training and combat experience gave me an advantage, but the opponent was no novice. He blocked my first strike, tried to pull out a knife. I intercepted his hand, twisted his wrist, forcing him to drop the weapon, then delivered a series of blows to his face and neck. The guard lost consciousness, going limp in my arms. The second was already aiming at me when the deck suddenly tilted even more steeply. He lost his balance. His shot went into the air. I threw the knife of his fallen comrade, hitting him in the shoulder. Not lethal, but painful enough to temporarily incapacitate. Morgan was still conscious, trying to crawl toward the fallen rifle. I stepped on his hand, stopping the movement. "Where's Daniel?" My voice sounded hoarse from smoke and tension. "Go to hell," he spat. I pressed harder on his broken fingers. Morgan howled in pain. On the bridge, preparing. A helicopter, he gasped. He betrayed us all, promised cover and money, and now abandoned us. I removed my foot from his hand. "Get out of here while you can." Morgan looked at me with hatred. Without the helicopter, no chance. All lifeboats gone. He fell silent for a second, then unexpectedly grabbed my ankle, trying to pull me down. We'll die together, Raynor. I struck him on the head with the pistol butt, freeing myself from his grip. Morgan went limp. I didn't check if he was alive. Slinging the fallen assault rifle over my shoulder, I rushed to the door where Monica was waiting. One flight of stairs remained to the captain's bridge when we heard the sound of helicopter blades. So Daniel had indeed called for an air evacuation. Smart. In the conditions of the dark night, this was the only reliable means of escape. He'll get away, Monica gasped from running. We won't make it. We will. I gripped the rifle more comfortably. We had to cross an open space in front of the bridge, a zone of visibility for anyone inside. I put a finger to my lips, showing Monica to stay behind me, and began slowly advancing along the wall. The bridge door was ajar. From inside came Daniel's voice. In 2 minutes on the platform, and no witnesses, you understand. I carefully peered inside. My brother stood with his back to me, holding a phone in one hand. Next to him was the yacht's captain, pale, with a bloodied head. Evidently, Daniel wasn't planning to take him along. End of game, Daniel. I entered the bridge, aiming the rifle at my brother. He slowly turned, lowering the phone. Alex and Monica, what a family surprise. His voice sounded tired but still retained characteristic sarcastic notes. Decided to say goodbye before my departure. You're not flying anywhere, I stepped forward. It's over. The FBI knows everything about you. Morgan betrayed you. Your Coast Guard is either killed or scattered. There's no way out. Daniel smirked, giving me an appraising look. There's always a way out, brother dear, for one who's willing to risk. He tapped his finger on a case. There are millions here, enough to start a new life somewhere on islands without extradition. I could take you both with me. To dispose of us in the air, I shook my head. Not today. Such distrust between family members, Daniel sighed. Yet once we were a real family. Remember, Alex, before father started turning you into his perfect military machine and wrote me off as a failure. Don't shift the blame, I kept him in my sights. You made your choice. Betrayal, blackmail, murder. Murder, Daniel snorted. What are you talking about? I didn't kill anyone. The mayor shot himself, weakling, and the fire in the Atelier was an accident. Electrical wiring, remember. And Alina, the seamstress who accidentally found your flash drive with compromising material. Something flashed in my brother's eyes, surprise. I didn't kill Alina. Why would I? She was the best seamstress, irreplaceable for the business. He turned to Monica. My dear sister-in-law seems not to have told you everything. I looked at Monica. What's he talking about? She paled. I don't know. Oh, let's not be hypocritical in the final minutes, Daniel set the case on the instrument panel. The show is coming to an end, time to reveal all the cards. He took a small tablet from an inner pocket. Surveillance camera recordings from the Atelier, the evening of the fire. He turned on the video. On the shaky image was Monica entering a utility room with a canister in hand. Then, she again, quickly exiting through the service entrance. The time on the screen showed half an hour before the first report of the fire. No, whispered Monica, this is a fake. I'm afraid not, Daniel shook his head. The FBI has already verified the authenticity. Your noble agent Kine and his team knew it was you who started the fire. They just decided to use you to get to me. I felt the ground disappearing from under my feet. Monica, is this true? She was silent, eyes downcast. Why? My voice grew hoarse. Alina saw us, Monica finally spoke. Me and Daniel, she threatened to tell you. I panicked. Panicked? I couldn't believe my ears. You killed an innocent woman because you panicked. She had a son, Monica, added Daniel with feigned grief. An 8-year-old boy, now an orphan. "Shut up," she screamed. "You set me up. It was you who said we needed to scare her. You gave me the canister." "But you lit the match." Daniel spread his hands. I looked at them both and didn't recognize them. The brother I once loved, the wife I trusted, two strangers distorted by greed and fear. In a daze, I lowered my weapon, just for a moment, a second of weakness, a moment of shock, but it was enough for Daniel. He pulled out a knife from behind his back and lunged forward, not at me, at Monica. Steel glinted in the dim emergency lighting. No, I rushed to intercept, but Monica was faster. She stepped between me and Daniel, taking the blow herself. Her eyes widened. "Monica," Daniel froze, not believing what he had done. She slowly sank to her knees, pressing her hands to the wound. Something inside me snapped. Everything that had been accumulated over 20 years of military service, cold rage, professional ruthlessness, precise calculation, burst out. I don't remember how I covered the distance separating us. I only remember the sound of breaking bones when my fist crashed into my brother's face. Again and again. Daniel desperately resisted. His hand with the knife described an arc aiming for my throat. I intercepted his wrist. The knife fell, but my brother continued fighting. We rolled on the bridge floor, exchanging blows as if we had returned to childhood, when we often fought over toys or parental attention. Only now the stake was life. "You always thought you were better than me," Daniel rasped, trying to reach for a pistol lying nearby. "Father made you his perfect son, and always considered me a weakling. You chose this path yourself." I blocked his lunge, delivering a counterblow to the liver. "I protected you, always protected." Daniel used the moment and grabbed a shard of glass from the floor. A swing, and the sharp edge slashed my cheek. I rolled to the side, avoiding a new blow, and encountered the knife that had fallen from my brother's hand earlier. A second of choice, life or death. I grabbed the knife, but not for killing. A sweep, a throw, and Daniel was pinned to the instrument panel, the blade at his throat. "Surrender," my voice sounded alien metallic. "Never," he rasped and sharply jerked backward, crashing into the control panel. The glass of the captain's bridge couldn't withstand the impact. With a deafening crack, it shattered to pieces, and Daniel disappeared into the dark opening, falling into the raging sea. I rushed to Monica, still trying to stop the bleeding. "Hold on," I pressed fabric to her wound. "We'll get out of here." "Too late," she whispered, her eyes clouding. "Forgive me, Alex, for everything." "Be quiet, save your strength." I lifted her in my arms. She seemed incredibly light, almost incorporeal. The captain's bridge began filling with smoke. The fire had reached here too. "Helicopter," Monica reminded, "on the roof, platform." Indeed, a helicopter stood ready for takeoff with running rotors. The pilot was waiting for Daniel, not suspecting that his passenger was already in the sea. "Hold on," I repeated, heading for the exit with Monica in my arms. The journey to the roof through the flame-engulfed yacht resembled a descent into hell, or rather, an ascent. Fire, smoke, collapsing structures. Twice the floor gave way beneath my feet, and only reflexes allowed me to jump away at the last moment. The wound was fatal. I had seen enough such wounds in war, but I didn't want to admit the obvious. "Almost there," I encouraged her, climbing up a narrow service ladder to the roof. "Alex," her voice was barely audible, "stop for a minute, please." I leaned against the wall, holding her in my arms. "Don't speak, save your strength." "No time," she coughed again. "I want you to know the truth." "I know enough." "No," she gathered her last strength. "I loved you in the beginning. It was duty, a sense of gratitude for the rescue, but then I fell in love truly." I looked into her eyes, trying to find another lie, but saw only sincerity and pain. "Daniel, he found out who I was, the daughter of the one you were supposed to kill, started blackmailing me, first money, Then help in schemes. She winced in pain. I was afraid you would find out, that you would hate me. I would have understood, the words came with difficulty. Why didn't you tell me? Cowardice, she smiled weakly. My eternal problem, cowardice and pride. The building shuddered from a new explosion. Time was running out. We need to go. I tried to lift her, but she stopped me. Wait. Monica, with trembling fingers, retrieved a small key from the bodice of her dress. For a bank safe deposit box. Number 247, Meridian Bank. There's everything. Copies of documents, recordings of conversations, evidence against all participants in the scheme. Why did you keep this? Insurance knew that Daniel would betray sooner or later. She coughed again, fresh blood appearing on her lips. I dragged us both into a dark vortex, saw no way out, forgive me. SHH, I stroked her cheek. Everything will be all right. We both knew this was a lie. The last meters to the roof were especially difficult. When I carried Monica onto the helicopter pad, the pilot was already preparing to take off, apparently deciding not to wait for Daniel. Stop, I shouted, barely audible over the noise of the rotors. The pilot saw us, hesitated. Panic was written on his face. He was expecting one person with a case of money, but got a bloody man with a dying woman. I ran to the helicopter, laid Monica on the cabin floor, then jumped in myself. Take off quickly. The machine lifted off from the deck at the very moment when the roof of the captain's bridge collapsed in flames. We rose into the night sky, watching as the giant yacht slowly sank into the waves, enveloped in fire and smoke. Monica lay with her head on my lap. Her breathing was becoming increasingly shallow. Cold, she whispered. I took off my torn jacket, covering her, though I understood the meaninglessness of this gesture. This cold, not from the surrounding air. This was life leaving the body. You know, her voice was barely discernible through the engine noise. Everything could have been different if I had been honest with you from the beginning. Everything will be all right, I repeated. We'll reach the shore, find doctors. She weakly shook her head. Don't lie, not now. Her fingers squeezed my hand. You were the best thing that happened in my life. I didn't deserve you. Monica. Forgive me, the last words were barely audible, for everything. Her eyes closed. The hand squeezing mine went limp. Breathing stopped. I sat holding my dead wife in my arms while the helicopter flew toward the shore. Inside was emptiness. Not pain, not grief, not anger. Absolute nothingness. 6 months later, I stood at a fresh gravestone. Gray granite, simple inscription. Monica Rayner, 1994-2025. Rest in peace. No epithets, no poems. What could be written about a life full of contradictions, love, and betrayal? The day was cold but clear. The cemetery was deserted, a weekday early morning. I placed a bouquet of white lilies on the grave, her favorite flowers. I thought I'd find you here. The voice behind me belonged to Robert Kine. The FBI agent looked much better than during our last meeting. The wound had healed, leaving only a small scar on his neck. He was in civilian clothes, a dark coat and scarf. Amazing that you survived it all, I remarked, not turning around. Irony of fate, Kine stood beside me. Morgan found me before the yacht finally sank. We escaped on a life raft. Who would have thought the man who tried to kill me ultimately saved my life? Where is he now? In federal prison, cooperating with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Kine was silent for a moment. You probably want to know about Daniel. I nodded. Survived. A fishing vessel picked him up an hour after the yacht sank, stubborn like his brother. Kine allowed himself a faint smile. Now in custody. He's been charged with 27 counts, including extortion, blackmail, organizing a criminal community, and complicity in involuntary manslaughter. With the evidence from Monica's safe deposit box, he has no chance of getting out before 30 years. And the others, the judge, the police chief. Most have been arrested. Some preferred deals with investigators. Kine took an envelope from his coat pocket. This is for you. I took the envelope. What is it? Monica's last letter. She gave it to me the day before the auction, asked to give it to you if something happened to her. He looked away. I should have delivered it earlier, but the investigation. I understand. I put the envelope in the inner pocket of my jacket. I would read it later in private. What are you planning to do next? Kine asked after a pause. Good question. For the past 6 months I had existed on autopilot. Gave testimony, helped the investigation, dealt with documents, insurance, funerals. Woke up, ate, slept, functioned, but wasn't living. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe I'll return to military service. There at least you know who's enemy and who's friend. Want some advice from a man who also lost his family because of work? Kine gazed into the distance, at the rows of graves. Don't go back to where you struggled so hard to escape. Start something new. I was silent. He was right, but what exactly new could a man with my experience and trauma begin? A question without an answer. Thank you for the letter, I said, extending my hand. Kine shook it. She loved you, Rainer. In her own way, with all her demons and mistakes, but she loved you. I hope you can find some comfort in that. He left, leaving me alone with the grave and unspoken words. I stood a while longer, then turned and walked along the gravel path toward the exit. At the cemetery gates I stopped, took out the letter, opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Several pages covered with familiar handwriting. Her last confession, last attempt to explain herself. I began reading and the world around disappeared. Only her words remained, her admissions, her farewell. The story of a girl who survived captivity and lost her father. The story of a woman torn between a sense of duty and true love. The story of mistakes, regrets, and ultimately redemption. The last lines imprinted in my consciousness. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope that someday you will remember not only my lies and betrayal, but also those moments when we were truly happy together. Because in those moments I wasn't pretending. I love you, Alex Rainer, until my last breath and beyond it. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope. My soul didn't feel lighter, but something new appeared, understanding. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first step toward it. Ahead lay a long road and an unknown future. I didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in 6 months, I felt that I was truly ready to take the first step. If you liked this story, please support the author with a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your emotions in the comments. Thank you.